Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca and 2020 is almost over. I am so excited to talk about my favorite books that I read this year. A lot of us probably read a lot more than we were expecting to this year, and maybe some of us have finally picked up a book for the first time in a long time. And I'm really excited to talk about these books because some of them are 2020 releases, which I am kind of surprised at because I feel like I rarely read this many books that are released during the year, but there are actually a couple of books on here that waited too long to read, and I am so glad I finally read them. So let's go ahead and jump into my best books of 2020, and we're gonna start at the bottom of the list and work our way to the top of the list. So I'm really interested to see, and definitely keep an eye out for this video in the next few days about my 2020 reading wrap-up, where I'm going to go through all of the statistics and fun things like that. I tend to feel like I read a lot of romance, but I feel like this year I kind of read so much in the beginning and then I kind of just sloped off at the end, and so there is only 2 romance books on this two romance on this list. And so I'm going to start with number 10, which is In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren are definitely my favorite romance authors, and I do feel like with a lot of their more recent books I'm liking them a little bit less. I have this book on this list, however, though, because I really enjoyed reading it, and I keep thinking about it a lot, and I'm just so excited to read it again next year. I never read like a holiday romance or a holiday novel that's not A Christmas Carol, so that was definitely a great experience reading this during the holiday season, and I think that's definitely the reason why it ended up on this list for my top 20 books of the year. Next would be Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I think this book definitely deserves a spot on the list because it is the romance novel that I am still thinking about. I think I read it like in the beginning of the year. I had an arc of it, so I read it before it came out, I think in May? I don't know. But I was really excited about it, and then I was really excited about it when it came out and everyone was talking about it. I just really loved this romance novel, and I really liked it because there was more to it than just your typical, because it's kind of like an enemies to lovers kind of trope. So there's definitely more to it, and I really enjoyed all of the literary aspects of it, as well as they are both, the main characters are both writers, and I thought that was really interesting to see them going through their writing process with each other and then basically trying to get each other to write in the other's genre. So I just really enjoyed it, and I keep thinking about it, and I'm really excited for her next book. So I think Emily Henry is probably going to be one of those authors who I'm buying all of their books from now on. I usually read quite a bit of graphic novels, and I do feel like I've read a lot this year, but definitely not as much as I usually did. However, there is one graphic novel that really sticks out to me as one of the best that maybe I've ever read, also the cutest, and has like a great plot line. The art is really awesome, and that's Sheets by Brenna Thumler. I loved this graphic novel. It is a middle grade, I would say like late middle grade, early high school age group there. And it's just adorable. It's about a ghost named Wendell, and I just loved how the ghosts were actually like sheets, like they were ghosts with sheets over them, and I loved the concept and the artwork, and absolutely adorable. I also just really loved the storyline, and I feel like I've seen a lot of people saying they didn't love it because they felt it was too sad, which I think is kind of strange. But anyway, I just thought that it was really actually uplifting, and really a great almost coming of age story, as well as like making friends and just dealing with grief. So I thought it was very well written, a really great concept to write with the graphic novel form. So definitely my favorite graphic novel of the year. Something you might notice as I'm going through this list, that these books might not be the most literary books on this list. They might not be the most well written or the most well rounded, But a lot of these books I'm choosing because I really enjoyed the reading experience, and they've also just really stuck with me. And so my next book that I want to talk about is House of Earth and Blood, Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. This is no way a perfect book. When I first started like my blog back in like 2016, and I was really into, when I first started like reading 100 books a year, I read a ton of fantasy. And I found that this year I did not read as much fantasy, and I really want to get back into it. And I feel like Sarah J. Maas is a great author to really help you get into the fantasy genre, because her books are very easily consumable. They're not like these really in-depth and confusing sometimes worlds. Like with other books in a series, you might spend the entire first book of a fantasy novel just mapping out the world, which can be really dry. But with Sarah J. Maas, you get really great characters, a really great plot, and just a really fun novel. So I definitely really enjoyed reading this year, and being that it's like, what, 800 pages? I actually read it pretty quickly, so I think that definitely says something, and I'm definitely going to be continuing in this fantasy series with the next books. I am really excited to see where the story is going and the other characters. I felt like the ending was the perfect cliffhanger that wasn't like, I need the next book right now, but it also kind of just like, very intriguing. I can't wait to see what happens next. So definitely on my top 10 of the year, just because of the reading experience that it gave me. Something that I've learned about myself this year is that I really hate thrillers. And I think it's also because the majority of the thrillers that are being released, you know, this year and recent years are domestic thrillers, and I really hate domestic thrillers. I think it's very interesting that they're so popular, because it's basically like a marriage / relationship that has gone wrong, and I'm just like, why is everyone so interested about reading that? I feel like that would be something that would get kind of like overdone, and I think it has. So definitely not a thriller person. I think what I need in a thriller is more depth, and I feel like a lot of them are not very deep, which is fine if you just want like a quick novel that's really intense and just a really quick paced novel. I mean, I understand why people would go for thrillers, because they're very quick and snappy and they keep you on the edge of your seat. But I definitely need more, and that's why When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole is on this list. This book is a lot of things. It is a thriller, it says it on the cover, but I also would say that it is literary fiction, and it's a romance, and it covers really important social and cultural, and I think it really also incorporates some really important historical information that a lot of people might not know about Brooklyn specifically, but also like the history of gentrification and how a lot of people don't know about it, I guess. I just feel like this was a very well written book. If you're hearing the word gentrification a lot and you're like, I don't get it, this is a very good book to illustrate how that happens, like how it happens for the most part. I think the end of it was very dramatic because it's a novel, it's a thriller, and so like I don't want to say that stuff doesn't happen because I don't know, but it kind of definitely gives you movie and drama vibes. Like they compare it to Get Out, which I've never seen because I'm a chicken and I don't like scary movies. But from what I've seen and heard of the movie, I definitely can understand why this would be compared to that. So definitely one of my favorite books of the year, definitely my #1 favorite thriller of the year, because it just held so much for me, and I really just enjoyed reading it and learning more about Brooklyn in general, and then also just like the historical aspects that they incorporate into the book, and I really loved it. Definitely 5 stars. Also, like, I just think the cover is really awesome. I don't know why I really like it, but I just think it's really great. Next up on my list is the 3rd book in a series, It is probably my most anticipated book of the year, because I've read the other two books in the series multiple times in the only 2-3 years that they have been out. So that book is Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. I know a lot of people, well, I've heard a couple of people say that they're not really impressed with this book as compared to the first two, which I'm just like, you know, this book is going to be like really, or the series is going to be really, really long. I just feel like expecting it to be super action-packed and like plot moving forward in every single book is kind of it's kind of asking a little too much in my opinion. But I don't feel like this book was lacking in any way. I thought that the character development for Morrigan Crow and her being a Wondersmith and learning more about the Wondersmiths in the past, I thought that was super interesting and like definitely like a really great aspect to this novel. Also kind of social commentary on the fact that because this book is about Hollowpox, so it's a disease that a specific group of creatures, magical creatures, people get. It really had a great commentary on the way that society reacts to that and the like obvious racism or creaturism that happens in results of these types of things. I think it was definitely pertinent to our current times, if you know what I mean. And I really, really enjoyed this novel. I think that this is a great series that everyone should read. Definitely a great book. One series that I'm definitely going to keep reading because it's just fantastic and I have not been disappointed yet. And I doubt that I will be. So definitely top 10, love this book, will probably reread this next year. So here we come to one of the books that I kind of feel a little shame for not reading sooner or not finishing sooner. This is a book that I've been working on for probably 2 years now. I know. And yeah, that's Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So this is a fantastic fantasy series. Like I said earlier, I haven't read, or I feel like I haven't read as much fantasy this year. I might end up going through my reading wrap up and finding that I've actually read more fantasy than I thought, but I definitely feel like I haven't read a lot. So this is going to be a fantastic series, and I really can't wait to continue with this. But at the same time, so this is only part 2 of the first book, which this is 400-ish pages. I think like the book as a whole is around like 1,000 pages depending on what kind of version you have. So because they're so long, it takes Brandon Sanderson quite a while to write one, as we should expect. So I don't want to catch up and then be waiting years for the next one. So I think I'm just gonna read one book a year. I say that now, but I bet you when I finish the second book that I will want to dive into the third one immediately, so who knows. But that is my plan for now. My goal is to read one of these a year, and I can't believe it took me so long to finish this book, but whew, so good. I'm really just so impressed all the time with Brandon Sanderson and his world building. And I am now more impressed with his character building because that's basically what this book is. And just weaving in these like mysteries of the world, and when you finally uncover like something, it's just like always mind-blowing. And so Brandon Sanderson is definitely one of my favorite authors, and definitely always probably going to be in the top 10. I also reread Mistborn this year, and I decided not to put any rereads in this best books of the year, but if I did, Mistborn would always be on that list because fantastic. So highly recommend if you're into fantasy and you haven't read this yet. I'm probably like the last fantasy lover who has not read this, so I'm definitely behind. But I'm going to catch up because this is a great series and everyone should read it. So before we get into my top 3, I do want to mention this one book, and it would be a favorite if I had finished it, but I'm planning to finish it before the end of the year. We'll see what happens, but that's Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I definitely think this is going to be a favorite because I love the Greta Gerwig adaptation, and with the first half of the book that I've pretty much read through, I'm already loving it so much, so I do think this will be one of my all-time favorite classics, and it would have been a favorite of the year if I finished it before filming this, but definitely an honorable mention, and I'm really excited to finish this. So now to my top 3. I don't want to say any of these are particularly my favorite of the year, because I don't want to make those absolute statements, because these are definitely the best 3 books I've read this year, and I can't choose a favorite. I can't do it. But they are probably my favorites in their genre / category. So let's go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to first talk about another book that shamefully took me too long to read, and that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I loved reading this. I definitely grew up seeing the adaptation. The 2005 one with Keira Knightley is definitely my favorite. It's also the only like specific Pride and Prejudice movie that I've seen. I have also seen Lost in Austen, which is about Pride and Prejudice but with a twist, so I'm not counting that. Yeah, so that's the only adaptation that I've seen that's specifically Pride and Prejudice, and I love it. One of my all-time favorite movies. And so I don't know why it took me so long to read this, probably because I hear a lot of people when they talk about Jane Austen say that Persuasion is their favorite Jane Austen book. And it's a lot shorter than Pride and Prejudice, so I had decided to read that first and regretted it because I didn't like it. And I think that because it was my first Jane Austen and it was before I was really getting into classics, that's probably why I didn't like it so much. So I plan on rereading it, get a better feel of it, but I think that made me scared to pick this up, which was totally stupid because as you can tell, I'm just gonna say my favorite classic. See, I hate these like absolute statements. I don't know if I can say that, because if you consider The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien a classic, then that would be my favorite classic. My favorite romance classic. My favorite British classic. My favorite classic that I've read this year, definitely. So if you love any of the adaptations, I definitely highly recommend reading this, because there's so much more to this than there is in the adaptation. A lot of more looks into the characters themselves, and just when you think of the title Pride and Prejudice, you know where the title is coming from. You definitely understand why Jane Austen called it that, but I feel like while reading it, I got it so much more. Like, I understood the depths of the pride and the prejudice that both Elizabeth and Darcy had that was, you know, stopping them from their romance. So I feel like this is just, it's the best because it's the, you know, source material. So definitely my favorite classic of the year and in my top 3. I'm kind of curious if, now that I'm down to 2 books, if any of you have guessed what these books are. Let me know in the comments if you guessed them before I talk about them. So these 2 books are, actually, I chose these books to read for my personal book club. When it was my turn to read, or to choose the book, I actually chose both of these books, which kind of like surprises me that a book club pick would be my favorite. And I don't know which order to talk about these in, because I loved them equally, but because of different things. So I'm gonna talk about them in tandem and then separately. But these books are Circe by Madeline Miller and The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I think an aspect of these books that I love that they both share is the fact that they're mostly taken place on like an isolated island or area. And I think that's something that I really, really enjoyed, just that like small close-knit community, or just close-knit like couple of people. And I think that really just sent these books higher, because I guess that's something I really enjoy. Now separately, let me talk about Circe. I love retellings. Some of my favorite books are retellings. Like my favorite author, Juliette Marillier, she writes retellings. That's certainly why I really loved this book. Circe, the character, I love that Madeline Miller chose to write her story, just because when we think of Circe, we think of like the Odyssey and the story of Odysseus and his men. I just like, it's not as interesting to me about these men and their war and their whatever, you know? But you come to Circe's island and where, you know, she turns Odysseus and his men into pigs, and that's really all you get from the Odyssey. I mean, you might get a little bit more, I don't remember, I haven't read it in a really long time, but I just really loved the in close depth look into Circe's character and just how Madeline Miller had interpreted the character, and I just thought it was very well done. Like, honestly, I would love for her to write a retelling of Medusa. Medusa is like my favorite Greek mythological character, especially like after reading this book. I would love to see her write Medusa's story and to tell it in a way that's empowering for women. So back to this book though, I loved this book for so many reasons, and I think like the most obvious is because it's a retelling. Second, because there's a romance in it. This book also is very emotional, and I'm an emotional person. So I really loved the emotion, and I loved the characters that, you know, were terrible and the ones that were great. I just felt like they were all really well written, and the story started in a great place and it ended perfectly. I just really loved this book. Also, like, I like listened and read this like back and forth, and I listened to it at a very hard part, that like one of those parts that makes you feel very viscerally, and I think that really also, while it was hard to read, just made it even better. So definitely in my top 3. Loved this book, and I probably should read her other books because I'm sure I will love them as well. So lastly, I'm talking about The House in the Cerulean Sea, and I don't want to say that this is my favorite book of the year, but this is a book that I've been constantly thinking about since I've read it. I know I'm going to reread it multiple times, probably every year if I can. I don't want to say that I was really influenced by all of the hubbub about this book, but I guess I was, because I knew that it was going to be really emotional, and like I said, I'm a really an emotional person, and I definitely love like really high emotion books, and so this is definitely one of those. But also just like the close-knit family, loved it. The relationships in this book, not just between Linus and Arthur, but also Linus and all of the children and their relationships to each other, their relationships to Arthur, the island in relation to, you know, the community that it's a part of. I just felt like TJ Klune really came up with a great masterpiece. This is a work of art. This is a book that makes you feel, and it makes you happy, and it makes you sad and angry, and I absolutely loved this book, and I can't wait to read it again. I think this also is a great book written for LGBT plus community and people who feel like they are misfits or that they don't fit in, because it's about family and choosing, you know, the people who love you. I just want to cry thinking about this book. It's so good. And I just also love the main character, Linus. I feel like TJ Klune wrote a character that otherwise would not have had his story told. Like, he works in an office building. He leads a very normal life. He lives by himself. He doesn't have a lot of family, a lot of friends. You know, he's just kind of a loner. And I feel like TJ Klune really tells a great story about, you know, a curmudgeon who just finds his place later in life, you know, how like in his 40s when he discovers the island and the children and Arthur. And I think that's great to have like an older main character who finds where he belongs and what he is passionate about. So I also think it's great in that aspect. Also, this cover is really beautiful. I love the colors, and it's just fantastic. I'm gonna read this every year. I already want to reread it. It might be like the Nevermore series where I read it multiple times a year. I'll have to like check out the audiobook and see how good it is, because if it's really good, that might be the way that I go. So, highly recommend. So that's it for the best books that I read in 2020. My top 10. I did read a lot of good books this year. I think that this has probably been my best reading year, and I'm really excited to go through my reading wrap-up later this week to see about like what genres I was reading, and you know, how I can do better next year with like diversifying my reading. So that is it for my top 10. I'm really interested. What was your favorite book that you read this year? If you can't choose a favorite, like I couldn't, maybe your top 3, your favorite genre, your favorite series, maybe you discovered a new author. Let's talk about it in the comments. I'm really interested to see if anyone has the same favorites that I do. Thanks for watching this video. I will see you in a new video soon, and please remember to subscribe to my channel and like this video.